Your place is in the kitchen. She said it with a smile. Layla, my brother's perfect little trophy wife, sitting across from me in a glittering gold dress she didn't pay for, sipping from a champagne flute I helped fund, thinking she just made the joke of the night. The table roared with laughter. My brother, Jason, slapped the table like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Even my dad smirked. And me? I sat there, perfectly still, not blinking, not laughing, because I wasn't shocked. I was done. My name is Emily, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because let me ask you something. Have you ever been reduced to a joke by the very people you built an empire for? Because that's what this was. They didn't see me. They saw a chair filler. A background character. A woman with spreadsheets. Not the one who made the entire deal happen. The banquet was held at the Westin Hotel Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers. Velvet drapes. $400 a plate catering. All for one reason. To celebrate Jason's company closing the biggest real estate deal in our family's history. What no one at that table knew. The deal wasn't his. It was mine. I built it in silence over 11 months. Used a shell LLC so no one knew I was the strategist behind the scenes. Negotiated every term from Dubai to Denver, all under a code name.
Why?
Because I wanted to see how far they'd go in erasing me. They didn't disappoint. Layla leaned forward after her comment, feigning sweetness. I mean, you do make the best casserole. Jason always says so. My mother chuckled. Well, she is single. She's got time to cook. That was it. No more warning shots. No more silent loyalty. I pulled out my phone, dialed one number, held it to my ear.
Hi.
Yeah, terminate the contract. Immediate withdrawal. Let them scramble. Then I hung up. Silence hit the table like a glass shattering. My father blinked. Jason froze mid-bite. Layla tilted her head, confused. What do you mean, terminate? Jason asked, voice suddenly tight. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin on the table, and tapped the champagne glass with my fork. The ballroom quieted. Everyone turned. I clicked the small remote in my other hand. Behind me, the LED screen above the stage changed. Jason's name disappeared. Mine appeared. Emily Blake, lead executive architect, Blake Holdings LLC. Below it, the title, The Mind Behind the Merger. Gasps rippled through the hall. Jason's business partner dropped his fork. A VP from New York stood up, stunned. Layla looked like she'd swallowed glass. This deal, I said calmly, was mine. The contracts, the capital, the client relationships. Jason was just the messenger. Then I turned to my brother. And now, thanks to a single phone call, it's gone. I smiled softly. I hope your wife likes kitchens. Because you're about to be cooking your own meals with no deal left to serve. I walked away. Not angry, not hurt, just free. Because when you've carried an empire on your back and they still call you just a woman, you don't fight. You flip the entire table. I didn't even make it out of the hotel lobby before my phone started vibrating like a hive on fire. Jason. Dad. Even Layla, calling from a blocked number. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, they were feeling something I knew intimately. Panic. The moment I stepped into the car, my assistant, Rachel, turned to me from the driver's seat with a grin. So, that went well. I exhaled slowly and stared out the window. 11 months of strategy unraveled in 11 seconds. Exactly how I planned it. See, this wasn't about just embarrassment. This was about a pattern, one I finally decided to break. For years, I'd been the smart sister, the organized one, the quiet achiever. Translation? The one they could dump tasks on, take credit for, and then shove into the background. My dad always praised Jason at family dinners like I wasn't sitting 2 chairs down with a master's degree and $100 million under management. Jason never once corrected him. And Layla? She loved making those side comments. Emily's great with paperwork. Emily doesn't need the spotlight. Emily's just not built for the front line.
Right.
Because I wasn't loud. I was lethal. And they never saw it coming. You're probably wondering why now. Why burn it all down at a public gala? Because the final straw wasn't business. It was family. 2 weeks earlier, I overheard my mother on speakerphone while I was dropping off some papers at their house. She was talking to Aunt Denise about the upcoming deal. Jason's finally stepping up. Thank God. We were so worried Emily would try to get involved. She's just not built for leadership. She doesn't understand men's work. I stood there in the hallway, hearing every word. My own mother. So, I decided that day, if they think I'm not built for power, then they don't deserve to know when I'm running it. The Blake Holdings deal was structured brilliantly. 3 holding companies. 2 offshore accounts. Every thread led to me. And not once did they think to ask who the real architect was. Jason just showed up to meetings, smiled, repeated my words, and soaked up applause. He didn't know I was recording everything. The calls. The emails. The backdoor commission he was trying to sneak through Layla's fake consulting firm. When he signed the deal's public face to himself, thinking he'd outsmarted me, I let him. Because the real power wasn't in the name. It was in the control. And I had every clause, every exit option, every leverage point in my hands. So when Layla told me to get back to the kitchen, she wasn't just insulting me. She was throwing gasoline on a bonfire she didn't even see. The next morning, the company's board called an emergency session. The merger was gone. Investors pulled out. Stock dipped. And Jason? He wasn't picking up the phone anymore. But the best part? The silence. Because for once, the ones who used to speak over me had nothing left to say. No defense. No spin. Just the haunting realization that the woman they dismissed had dismissed them. And I wasn't even finished. Because every empire leaves a trail. And I was about to show the world exactly who laid the bricks beneath theirs. Jason didn't show up at the office the next day. But Layla did. In designer heels, with oversized sunglasses, like she was starring in a reality show no one had asked for. She walked into Blake Holdings, my company, not his, like she owned it, marched right up to the front desk and demanded to see whoever's in charge of this mess. The receptionist, bless her, barely glanced up before saying, "Sure. Ms. Blake is expecting you." Layla blinked. "Wait. Emily? Emily's in charge. Always has been," my assistant Rachel said, stepping out of the elevator. "You're just very late to the reveal." She followed us in, her confidence visibly cracking. We walked into the executive conference room, the same one Jason once told me wasn't a place for scheduling assistants. I sat at the head of the table. Rachel handed me the file. Layla remained standing, arms folded tight across her designer blouse. "I think there's been some kind of mistake," she said, voice clipped. "Jason was just trying to." I held up a finger. "Jason tried to steal millions in deal commissions by using your fake consultancy to launder payouts from foreign contractors." She froze. So I opened the folder and laid out the evidence. Wire transfers. Email threads. A signed NDA from a developer in Munich who flipped the whole scheme the second we offered immunity. He really thought no one would trace it. But I did. Months ago. She looked like she wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, "Why didn't you stop it earlier?" "Because I wanted to see how deep it would go." Then I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "And because I wanted everyone to see what happens when people confuse quiet with weak." Later that evening, I got a call from my father. He didn't say hello. He just sighed. "You embarrassed this family, Emily." "No, Dad," I said calmly. "I exposed it." "You didn't have to do it like that." "Didn't I? After all these years of carrying Jason's messes, funding your retirement plan, pretending like your boys' club wasn't suffocating, you think I owe you subtlety?" Silence. "You could have at least warned us. You warned me my whole life that I wasn't built for this. I just finally believed you long enough to flip the script." I hung up, blocked the number, and poured myself a glass of wine. Because the thing about letting others take credit? Eventually they choke on it. The media caught wind within 48 hours. Real deal architect behind Blake Holdings revealed as Emily Blake. Fraud investigation looms over failed merger. CEO's sister steps forward. And my favorite headline of all, the woman in the kitchen? She owned the whole restaurant. Investors flooded in. Clients I hadn't heard from in years suddenly admired my long game. I didn't need their validation, but I took their funding and built something bigger, bolder.
With my name on the door this time.
Jason? His accounts were frozen pending investigation. Layla filed for divorce within the month. My parents tried to host a family dinner to heal. I sent back their invitation with a sticky note that said, "Kitchens close," because here's what they never taught me. Sometimes revenge isn't rage. Sometimes it's calm, measured. A slow-turning knife they handed you years ago, and you learned how to sharpen it with every fake smile, every backhanded comment, every know your place. And now, I knew mine. It was never in the kitchen. It was at the head of the table. By week 2, I had taken the bones of the failed merger and stitched together something smarter.
Cleaner.
Scandal-free. I renamed the venture Blake Capital.
Short. Sleek.
Powerful. And for once, no one asked who the E stood for. Because now they knew. The best part? The very same investors who once told me I was too academic, too cautious, or my favorite, too emotional to scale aggressively, were now practically begging for a seat at the table. I made them wait 3 weeks, then invited them to the new office launch with a note that read, "Only 1 seat available. Bring humility." Meanwhile, Jason had gone dark. His accounts? Frozen. His business license? Under review. His marriage? Over. Layla filed for divorce citing irreconcilable exposure. It was messy. She tried to pin it all on him, but I had emails from her. She thought CCNG me on her secret invoices would go unnoticed. Rookie mistake. She forgot I read everything. One afternoon, I was going through the final paperwork to buy out the last of Jason's shares, the ones he secretly tried to hide under a childhood friend's name, when Rachel walked in with a grin on her face. "Guess who's waiting in the lobby? Santa Claus?" I said.
Close.
"Jason." I looked up, blinked once. "Send him in, but make him wait 5 minutes. I want him to remember who owns the clock now." When he walked into my office, he looked smaller. Not physically, emotionally, like someone had finally peeled away his performance. Same tailored suit, same gelled hair.
But now?
He wasn't sitting at the head of the table. He was asking for it. I just wanted to talk." "You mean confess? Apologize? Or beg?" He flinched. "I didn't know the deal was yours."
I swear.
"I thought you were just helping." "Helping," I repeated flat. "As in, working 70-hour weeks for free while you collected praise?" "I didn't mean to cut you out." "Jason, you didn't cut me out. You stood on a stage and lit the whole bridge on fire while smiling in my face." He shifted in his seat. Looked like he might cry. But I didn't move. Because this was the face I'd seen behind closed doors my whole life, the one that showed up only when consequences did. "So what now?" he asked. "You're just going to erase me from the company?" "No," I said. "You already did that yourself. I'm just making it official." He stood to leave. Paused at the door. "Dad's disappointed, you know. He's been disappointed in me since I was born without a Y chromosome. I'm good." That night, I walked through the new office again. Just me and the soft hum of fresh lights. The name Blake Capital gleamed above the glass entry. And I remembered how Jason once told me, "You're good at research, Em. But no one invests in spreadsheets." Turns out, they do when the spreadsheets start buying buildings. The empire they tried to ignore? I rebuilt it, smarter, cleaner, stronger. And this time, I didn't need applause. I just needed silence loud enough for them to hear me win. By the end of the quarter, Blake Capital had closed 3 high-profile development projects, 2 of which Jason had previously pitched and failed to secure. Investors loved the rebrand. Media outlets were calling me the silent architect. And I'll admit it, the irony made me smirk. I was the same woman they once called too analytical to lead.
Now?
I was rewriting their business textbooks in real time. But the real moment, The one I'd been waiting for came when the family's legacy firm, Blake and Sons Holdings, called an emergency board meeting. And guess what? They invited me. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. I showed up 5 minutes early in a navy suit. Clean lines, no jewelry. Let them shine with their fake Rolexes and fading titles. My mother sat stiffly at the far end of the table, like she didn't recognize the woman who used to take notes and refill coffee during these very meetings. Jason was there too, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Their attorney stood up and began. Due to the recent collapse of the Dubai deal and the dissolving partnerships tied to it, we're facing serious insolvency threats. We've asked Ms. Emily Blake here to. Ms. Blake. I cut in. That's funny. Didn't know I earned a title now. Silence. Go on, I said coolly. I'm curious what the people who pushed me out want from me now. Their CFO, the same man who once told me, "Let the boys handle this, sweetheart," cleared his throat. We'd like to propose a temporary merger with Blake Capital, a mutual integration to restore market confidence, and I laughed.
Once.
Sharp. Everyone turned. You're asking me to save the house that threw me out, and in return, I get what, a seat at the dinner table again? Emily, my father said sternly, this is your family. I locked eyes with him.
Exactly.
And that's why you never saw this coming. I stood up, opened my briefcase, and slid a folder across the table. Inside, a complete buyout offer.
Signed.
Funded. Legal. It wasn't a merger. It was a takeover. You have two choices, I said calmly. Take this deal, let your firm survive under my control, or let it rot and go bankrupt within 6 months. Your clients are already eyeing the exits. Jason's hands trembled as he reached for the papers. You're bluffing. I tapped my phone once, and the wall monitor behind me flickered to life. Client exit letters. Lawsuits pending. Withdrawal emails.
Live.
Timestamped. Verified. I don't bluff. I build. And rebuild. And if I have to, I bury what doesn't evolve. My mother finally spoke. We raised you better than this. I turned slowly to her.
No.
You raised me to serve. You taught me how to swallow pride and bake it into casseroles while the men feasted on my work. But I raised myself into someone who doesn't flinch anymore. They signed the deal by 5 p.m. I left the boardroom not as a visitor, but as the owner of the very legacy they denied me. Not to spite them, not for glory, but because sometimes the best revenge is giving people exactly what they said you weren't capable of, and doing it better than they ever imagined. 3 weeks after the takeover, I walked through the hallways of Blake and Sons Holdings. Only now it was Blake Holdings, Inc. I dropped the Sons. Not out of pettiness. Out of accuracy. There were no sons left standing. Jason had resigned quietly. Dad had taken an early advisory retirement, which meant I let him keep his office while I rewired every system he thought he understood. And me? I sat where he once told me I'd never belong. At the head of the table, with both the capital and the control. What they didn't know, I never wanted their approval. I wanted their absence, silence, space, and the kind of peace I could finally afford without begging for it. So I made one last move. I took the family house, the one we all grew up in, the one they tried to mortgage against my name without asking, and put it on the market. When my mother called to ask what was happening, I simply replied, "The house is being sold. You can box up your memories, or I'll have movers do it. Emily, you can't just erase where we raised you. You're right. I can't erase it, but I can sell it. I already did." I didn't even flinch, because that house never felt like mine. It was just the place I learned to stay quiet. I moved into a home I bought with my own name, no shared deed, no inherited guilt. Downtown loft. Clean architecture. Sunlight pouring in. A small garden on the balcony, just rosemary, mint, and basil. The smell of growth. Control. Simplicity. No sticky notes on the fridge telling me what I owed. No laughter at my expense at dinner. Just peace. One evening, as I was organizing my books, I came across a small box from my old storage. It had dust, but it hummed with memory. Inside, a note I'd written to myself when I was 19. If they ever make you feel small again, build something so big they have to use your name just to stay standing. I smiled. I had built it, and I didn't just use my name. I turned it into a standard. Then came the phone call I wasn't expecting. Jason. He left a voicemail, broken voice, raw around the edges. Emily, I messed up. I know I did. And I know you don't owe me anything. But I'm
sorry.
I lost everything. I don't even know who I am without the title, without the noise. But you figured it out. You always did. I was just too busy pretending. I didn't return the call. Not out of cruelty. Out of closure. Some stories need to be told. Others need to end. And this one? It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redistribution. Of power. Of voice. Of legacy. The house that raised me taught me obedience. But the house I built, it taught me value.
Mine.
And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's assistant. Someone's sister. Someone's afterthought. I felt like someone who walked away from the wreckage and turned it into a throne. The first time I saw my father after the buyout, he was sitting alone at the edge of a charity gala we used to attend together, back when I was the +1 in my own legacy. He didn't notice me at first. He was thinner, quieter, wearing the same old cufflinks he used to boast about. The ones Mom gave him when Blake and Sons hit its first million. Now, he looked like a man clinging to past glitter, while the gold had moved on. I could have walked away, but I didn't. I walked right up, glass in hand, heels echoing through the marble. He looked up slowly. Emily. Dad. A beat passed. Not awkward, just inevitable. Did you really have to change the name? He asked. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch.
Yes.
Because there are no sons left. And the ones who built the empire were never listed on the front. He sighed, shoulders slumping like he suddenly felt his age. It's strange. You look so much like your mother when she was younger. But you move like no one we ever knew. Maybe because I had to move through everything you pretended wasn't broken. He didn't respond. Back at my table, Rachel leaned in with a quiet smirk. They're calling you the Storm in Heels online. I shook my head. Let them talk. I'm done explaining the thunder. We raised our glasses. I didn't toast to vengeance. Or to victory. I toasted to visibility. Because for years, I did everything right. Paid my dues. Let my name sit quietly behind Jason's success. Cooked the dinners. Covered the bills. Smiled through it all. And for what? To be told my place was in the kitchen? To be erased from deals I designed? To be thanked with sticky notes and sarcasm? No more. The next week, I launched something new. The Blake Initiative. A mentorship program for young women in finance, law, and tech. We offered capital, but more importantly, we offered clarity. No smoke. No politics. No boys' club dinners with closed-door deals. Just women who'd had enough of ceilings. Glass or otherwise. One of our first applicants was a 21-year-old coder from Detroit who had been passed over 3 times by companies that told her she was too intense. Her pitch? Flawless. Her drive? Unstoppable. When I handed her the acceptance letter personally, she cried. I thought no one like you even noticed girls like me. I took her hands and said, I was you. They just didn't see it. That night, I walked home alone through the city. Not lonely, just full. Full of the kind of peace that comes when the storm passes, and the only sound left is your own breath, steady, unshaken, and finally heard. At a red light, a billboard caught my eye. My face. Above it. She didn't ask for a seat at the table. She built her own. Below it, Emily Blake, founder and CEO, E. Blake Capital. I stood there a long time, not to admire it, but to remember the girl who once looked for her name in the credits and never found it.
Now?
I was the headline. And the fine print. The housewarming party at my new place wasn't loud. It wasn't extravagant. It was intentional. Real friends. Real colleagues. No filtered relatives. No obligations masked as loyalty. Just light jazz, a skyline view, and the sound of people genuinely laughing, not at me, not above me, with me. Someone tapped a glass for a toast. Rachel smiled. You all know her as Emily Blake, CEO, strategist, boardroom assassin. But I knew her when she was sharing office space with a printer and didn't even have her own chair. Laughter echoed. Then silence. Everyone looked to me. I held my glass but didn't raise it. Instead, I said, a year ago, I was standing in a dining hall where I was told my place was in the kitchen. My brother's wife smirked like it was a fact. My family laughed. And I did what I'd always done. I stayed quiet. But silence isn't submission. Sometimes silence is strategy. And sometimes it's the sound just before the ground shifts. I looked around the room, at the women I hired, the team I built, the world I redesigned. I was never weak. I was waiting. And this was what they had waited for. A few days later, I visited my old childhood home.
It was almost empty now.
Just boxes and dust and echoes of voices that had never really seen me. In the corner of the attic was the last thing left behind.
An old wooden sign.
Family means everything. I stared at it. Then, with a marker from my purse, I added, unless they spend it. I left it there, not out of spite, out of memory, so that anyone who walked in after would know. This was once a home. Then it became a battlefield. Then it became mine. On my way out, I passed the garden where I used to sit with books while the rest of them played power games inside. I picked a single rose from the overgrown bush. Not for decoration. For closure. Weeks later, Jason texted me again. I'm in therapy. Starting over. No angle. Just wanted to say thank you for not destroying me when you had the chance. I didn't respond. Because forgiveness doesn't require replies. And peace doesn't need performance. I was scheduled to speak at a global finance conference in LA. The night before, I stood on my balcony with tea in hand. Beneath me, a city sparkled. Above me, silence held. And within me, stillness. The kind I never thought I'd feel, because they taught me I had to earn rest. Now I knew.
Rest is a right.
Respect is non-negotiable. And revenge? It's not always fire and fury. Sometimes it's a locked door you walk past, while they pound on the other side, begging to be let into a world they once told you you'd never belong to. I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and whispered the final words of the story they tried to erase. She wasn't the girl who broke. She was the woman who rebuilt.